Blessings, I'm Jules, and I have Lisa with me today, and we are the Crystalline Channel. We have a subject that I feel very passionate about, and I know Lisa does as well, and that's when we start this path of awakening, a spiritual path, a self-empowering path. We can butt up against sometimes when we're not really sure what part of us is having the experience. And what I mean by that is it the program self or the ego self, or is it the part of us that's actually evolving? And especially in the early stages of awakening, one thing that I notice a lot is that when we stop identifying with where we were before, we want to replace that identity with something new. And a lot of times you'll hear people finding out that, oh, I'm a star seed, or oh, I'm part of this galactic, or oh, I'm part of this ascended master, and even I'm part of this guru's group. Right? Is that we have to replace a new identity. And there's nothing wrong with that when it's done in the right way. But I just feel like this topic of recognizing, is it the ego that's healing, or is it that you're actually shifting into this new evolved aspect of self? But is that self really need to be identified? And how do we know the difference?
This is such an important topic. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with breaking down old constructs and the way that we've been are trained to, I don't know if the word, I want to say condition the brain, but I'm not sure that that's even right. But, we're taught that everything has to go in a box. I have to have an identity. I have to have a name or a label that, and if I don't, then I'm lost. I don't know where I'm going or what's happening. And I think that part of what this shift is all about is breaking the idea of those boxes and putting ourselves in a specific group or identity, or even allowing ourselves to let go of the old belief systems and the old way of being, and then being able to move into this space. And I'm calling it nothingness because that's what's coming to me. It's like we're moving into this space of nothingness where the experience that I had was I kept hearing the word clean slate. You have a clean slate. It's like the whiteboard is completely clean where you can start all over again. And so the idea of breaking down the old identification, who we have been conditioned to believe that we are, or the idea that we have to fit in a certain box, this new energy pattern is wiping all of that clean. Okay, so now I have a clean slate and I don't know what to do with it. So does that little questioning jump back into the mind and the ego and saying, well, you do have to have an identity. You do have to identify what you're connected to. Because if you don't, then who are you? What are you?
That's so true. And I will say that we can use identity as an ascension tool. I do feel like that is, in the beginning, really helpful, is that instead of being like, well, now I have to keep the slate clean, what I call an abstract frequency, right?
Mhm.
Because the consciousness wants to identify. And so what we can do in the beginning is say, well, I know I no longer want to have this aspect of self. So maybe it's feeling unworthy or feeling disconnected. And maybe the higher identity of that would be self-empowerment or divine connection. And that's still an identity, but it's how we can shift from a lower identity to a higher identity. But what we don't want to have happen is that we put that identity in a box and then it limits us. So we can use it as an ascension tool. But I want to go back to also just that blank canvas, because I feel there's so many opportunities. I mean, every day we can wake up with a blank canvas.
Yeah.
And so when we're choosing what are we going to put onto that canvas? It's what we feel like when we are actually deciding to put something on. So that's when we have to have that awareness is, am I choosing to put something on my canvas because I feel uncomfortable if there's nothing on it would be like the first question.
Hmm.
Am I just putting something there so that I don't have to feel that uncomfortableness? Or is it something that I feel inspired by? And then we can start to at least dictate, what are we attaching to? Is it coming from this place of just not wanting to be in that nothingness that you say, or that abstract frequency? Or is this actually coming through as an inspiration of my highest self?
Yeah. Yeah. So the perfect introduction. Okay. So how do we do that?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
This is one of, for me, this is like, this is my jam. I love this aspect. And I do feel that a big part of it is just having awareness. And a lot
Yeah.
of times people will go to the mind for awareness, but I like to teach go to the body first, because your body will always tell you the truth. And
Mhm.
so if the body is contracted, if it's nervous, even if it's in an emotional response, then we know that we wait. It's when the body is still and expansive, calm, it's not in an emotional response, then we know that whatever is coming through in that moment is connected to the higher self.
Yeah.
How would you say it?
Exactly the same way.
Mm.
Exactly the same way. I talk about it all the time. And it's so important for us to be able to be more familiar and connected to our bodies so that we can feel it. A lot of us are disconnected, and it's a survival pattern. We start doing it when we're children. And, if you're in an uncomfortable situation, I'm getting out of here. And then you just stand there with the blank face and, just shake your head. Yes, whatever. So it's something that a lot of us do, but it's really important that we recognize when we're not connected to the body. It's called disassociation. And so as we become more aware, bring our energy body back into the physical body, and then start feeling feeling it, being able to start feeling what the heart, the chest area feels like. Is it tight and constricted? We know when we're in fight or flight all the time. Another pattern that we have been in since we were children. It's always I got to do, or I got to go, or I got to be, or whatever it may be. It's this continual fight or flight that we don't even recognize, that where our body is shut down, to where when you're in that fight or flight, everything is constricted. And so as we start recognizing the fight or flight and our body starts loosening up, then you start feeling things. People that are in chronic pain, suck it up. You have to figure out how to live with it. Anytime that you're in an uncomfortable situation and you go into a place of denial, okay, I just have to live with this, so I just got to figure out how to get through it. We have developed this human pattern of disassociating from our feelings, our emotions, and the physical body. And so it's kind of like the very first thing that you need to do is to get in contact with the body and recognize that you don't even know what it feels like to feel that expansiveness.
It's also coming to me. Most people that are going to be listening to this are more sensitive. I mean, the people that are really waking up, and those that maybe have been on a waking path for 30 years or more. Most of us came in at a sensitive level that not everybody in the world is vibrating at, and for that reason, we also, when we are walking the earth, are just naturally vibrating at a higher frequency. And what I have noticed is that because of that, we're always looking for the lowest frequency in our environment in order to stay safe, because we recognize, if we're not aware of that our frequency is a lot higher, our body is registering something is off. And it could be, okay, it's just that my frequency is vibrating a little bit higher. That doesn't mean that anything is wrong. It just means that I need to stabilize in my frequency so that I can have the experience of my environment through my home frequency, is what I call it, versus lowering my frequency. Because when we're not taught how to what you're saying, embody our energy body, or to embody our home frequency and recognize what that frequency is, and then also recognize what it is when we're in the presence of another person, because it's that difference in frequency that can trigger something in the body that says something's wrong. And
Hmm.
then we go into that fight or flight, and I call it bottom feeding. So what we learn to do is that where we're in the presence of others, our body goes and scans the room for the lowest frequency, and then when we find it, we go and match it, and then we think that's going to keep us safe. But then all of a sudden we become disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from what feels right to us, and then we leave and wonder why we're exhausted.
Yeah.
And then we want to start hibernating and not being around people, and we
Mhm.
start to see people or being around other people as exhausting or something that we need to protect ourselves from. And you hear it all this time, oh, protect your energy. But what if it's just know yourself, know
Yeah.
your home frequency, and know when you start to lower it, that that is actually a choice, and that you don't have to lower it in order to stay safe. You can actually stabilize in it.
Yeah. Well, this may be getting off topic, but you mentioned it. Protect your frequency. So what does that mean? Explain that and explain that
Say
to
it
me.
again. What you
That
said.
you said protect your frequency.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to answer that question, or are you asking me to answer
Now
it?
I want you to explain
Yeah.
what you're referring to.
So when I hear protect your frequency, it is, first of all, feel like it's an old paradigm way of being.
Yes. Yes.
Because to protect yourself means that you're projecting an outside force that has the ability to shift what your experience of reality is, or of self. And that's putting the responsibility out of your hands. But if we become responsible for our own energy and our own frequency, and another way of saying that is that we're very conscious of what we're agreeing to and what we're not. And that is, it's really knowing the self, right? It's not about putting up boundaries, and it's about knowing the self and then reading the rest of, if you know your frequency and you know who you are, and that takes a while, right? And we're
Hmm.
going to fluctuate back and forth. But when it all comes down to it, it was when we're embodied as self, everything that is not of that frequency is just information. And then we get to choose, does this resonate with me or not? But we always go back to the resonance of self. And that is the boundary. It's your own boundary of what resonates and what doesn't. It's not about projecting that
Hmm.
somebody is wrong and bad and I need to protect myself.
Yeah. 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 So because it is the old paradigm. And so what I'm curious about is that, like the old way of saying is, like putting that protective bubble around you. So are you referring to the same thing?
Yeah, I feel like that's the old paradigm way
Yeah.
that we put this protective light, but I don't know that that's what it is. I guess, if you wanted to reverse that and say, okay, I'm going to put this bubble around me so that I can have the reflection of what my own frequency is for a little bit, so that I can get to know myself at a deeper level and what it feels like to be in the presence of my own frequency. Great, go explore that. But at some point, it's not about it's once we know thyself, that everything that we judge or that we have the experience of after that is simply an ascension tool. I mean, really, it is. It's all about
Yeah.
how we interact with reality and how we choose to either bring that through what we call our program self, or bring it through the self that is ascending.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's why I want to bring that up, because the old paradigm is, you put the protective bubble around your car, put the protective bubble around you when you walk into a space. And I feel like that's limiting. I feel like it's almost denying this beautiful energy light that's within you in order to project it. It's almost like it's pulling it in. And the way that I've always understood it is that the more that we stand in this beautiful light frequency, heart frequency, this divine energy, and the more that we can connect to it, it radiates from us. And it's going to help us to stand in our truest frequency without any other interference. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And when it all comes down to it, I think what we're really talking about is being responsible. And in that responsibility, there's awareness. Because if we're going to be totally responsible for ourselves, it's also knowing that we're always going to be ascending, right? And so often we just kind of think, oh, I had this experience and now this is going to be my belief system around that experience. And then we never really challenge it again. And I feel like that's kind of moving into the new paradigm, is that everything is an ascension tool. I keep saying it, that reality is always reflecting a pathway of challenging consciousness to expand.
So let's go back to our ego.
Oh gosh, yeah. That, you gotta love it. I think we all should name it. I have a friend that calls it El Duardo.
Okay, so let's break this down for people. So when you're referring to your ego,
Mhm.
because there's lots of different belief systems about this ego. We have an ego because it's there to protect us. It has a purpose. In modern psychology, it fits into this category. However, we're talking about a different frequency of energy that we're moving into that's kind of separating from that definition. Okay. Okay. So what is your idea of what the ego is, how to serve it? And so when people talk about, well, you can't live without your ego. Okay, explain that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll say I completely disagree with that. I feel like that as we evolve, part of what and this is going to be more in an advanced state, but we will move into a space where we don't identify in order to exist. Because if you really think about it, it's the part of us that has to identify and exist is the ego itself. So if the ego isn't there, does it mean that we don't exist? Well, no, it doesn't. It just means that we exist in that nothingness, or what I would say is you're at one with source, and that intelligence becomes who you are, but you're not identifying as that intelligence. And so when we're talking about the ego, this is why we could shift into another way of saying what is the ego, and some people may push up against this, but I'm going to stand strong in it, is consciousness. Because if
Mhm.
you think about what is consciousness, it is the awareness of. And so that part of us that is conscious of the self, or the part of us that is conscious of our thoughts, or even just thought in general, it can be there. And if you can call it the subconscious, that it's running without maybe us being aware of it, but it's still part of a field of identity, because even the subconscious has to run through a frequency pattern that has already existed or has already been experienced. And so when we talk about the ego, it's the same thing as consciousness. And the reason that this is something that I feel like we need to look at is because consciousness wants to identify as well. It
Mm.
wants to observe. And when we identify as what's being observed, we limit ourselves. And I think that's just, I don't know if that was really answering your question, but that's why I like to say consciousness, instead, we're moving out of consciousness being an identity
Yeah.
to consciousness being a tool.
Well, and don't we think that the way that you just described it, because I think you explained it beautifully, is that the ego is part of that 3D structure.
Mhm.
I think, when you're talking about consciousness, well, it's the level of consciousness that has to have an identity, that has to, have that. Oh my gosh, it's like, it's where the power control or the insignificance. It's where you start identifying or finding yourself falling into these boxes and into these labels. And then, and I think, now correct me because I'm just throwing this out here right now. I think that that 3D energy that our mind, our ego was created in is holding that energy pattern and those beliefs. Oh my God, I can't. Beliefs and frequencies. That's all the old heavy dense energy. It's all created into the power and the egos. I mean the egos, the power and the failures or the fears or the anxiousness. All it's all identified. Our egos are all identified with that construct. And so as we shift and we move to a higher frequency, we're letting go of those old 3D ideas, boxes. And so we're moving into a newer, higher frequency where those ideas don't really resonate anymore. And that starts breaking down the 3D ego. Does that make any sense?
It does. It does. And that's where I feel like a lot of us will have those kind of what we call the death of the ego,
Yeah.
right? And that's kind of like circling back to where we started this conversation is that when the ego has a death, immediately what it wants to do is reconnect to a new identity. And right there is kind of what my passion is in this episode today is challenge yourself to not do that. And even if you are doing it, going back to that place is it feel like it's coming from inspiration, that stillness, that place of peace, so that we know that we are reconnecting to a new identity of the higher self or the ascended self, the self that is moving into this new dimension. There's a lot, there's a lot of different ways that we can occupy the ego, and especially when we're in that place of searching, because that's what happens when our ego is stripped or when our consciousness is put into this place where nothing resonates. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And that's an uncomfortable place to be. So we immediately want to go, okay, well, who was I in a past life? Why am I the way I am?
Mhm.
I mean, we know like it's the whys, it's the searching. And one thing that I always like to say is instead of asking why, ask what. What is this showing me? Because when we start to ask what, we open our consciousness up to being curious, to receiving an answer outside of our ego. When we ask why, we immediately go into the programming, into the third dimension, searching for the answers. And then when we show up, we're like, oh, I'm going to go see a healer or a psychic, and they're going to tell me why I am the way I am, or they're going to tell me who I am.
Mhm.
And I'm just going to challenge, or the invitation would be go inside and self. Go inside and ask, you know, like, what is this experiencing showing me? And what it does is it opens up your consciousness to receive information from your high self, from that part of consciousness that is connected into that, if we want to say the fifth dimension or multi dimensions, and we start to receive something that's not of our programmed reality.
So how do people do that?
Well, we could do the sunflower exercise. I mean, that is always my go-to because it's not something that it's like you learn through experience, right? And knowing the difference. That's really what it is. It's because it's more on a feeling level than because the mind can't comprehend it. So it's not something you can teach on an intellectual level, but it's something that you can teach through experience. And then once you have the experience, your body knows the experience, and then you will always know which one you're in.
Mhm. Okay, let's come back to the sunflower exercise because I do think we need to do that. But what I'm curious about, and I think that one of the hardest things for us humans to do right now is to let go of the idea of having to know.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Okay, so for example, um, because when I do sessions, people are, what galactic group am I connected to? Where did my soul originate? And where when I speak light language, well, who is speaking? And I find that, again, we are so programmed to have to know these identities, and we have to know, all of these different things, ask the questions. Okay, I get it. I totally, totally get it. And I mean, I've had to go through it myself of being able to recognize it doesn't matter if I'm Pleiadian or Lyran or Syrian. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter that I have to identify, what language that I'm speaking when I do light language, because there's a lot of different aspects to this too. But our mind is like, okay, I have to have an identity so I can say I'm Lyran or I'm Syrian or I'm angelic or, all of these different things. And this is what our environment has kind of created. But it also is human. I'm a baseball player. I'm an academic. I'm a lawyer. I am smart. I am not smart. It's like our society created us to be in these boxes. But what I've learned doing this work is that we're not connected to one thing. We are not only one thing. We are not only Lyran. We are all these billions of different species. And so for me to limit myself into thinking that I am only Lyran, that's like just this little what the word I'm hearing is microcosm. It's like it's this little dot of the truth of who I am. So breaking the idea that I have to know is breaking old programming. Being open to the idea of what if I don't know and I just receive? What if I don't feel like I have to be like Jules or be like Lisa? I have to do what they do. And I'm not succeeding or I'm not successful if I don't do it just like them. Okay, so we have an idea why we look at somebody or something and it's like, okay, I want to be like that because they are successful, they have an audience, they whatever you're labeling the idea on that individual, then you're associating and you're identifying with that specific thing, and there's something that's triggered inside of you that's making you feel like this is who I have to be in order to be successful, to be liked, to be whatever, have more friends, whatever it is, whatever. And the idea of letting go of the idea that I don't have to be like anybody, I can just be. I don't have to be a specific galactic species to give myself purpose. I don't have to I don't have to do any of these or fit into these boxes. I can just be. The second that we get to that point, then we start feeling lost because I don't know who I am because I don't have a label or a box that I can fit in. And if you really start thinking about when you have a label or a box, then it kind of gives you a little sense of peace because this is how we've been so conditioned to be. But then when we let those boxes go, that's when we still feel like we're starting to flounder and we don't know what direction to go because it's like you're just this big blob.
Yeah, it's so funny because I'm hearing you talk and maybe it's just my rebellious self, but I'm actually the exact opposite. I'm like, don't put me in a box. Don't put an identity on me. I can
Yeah.
remember having an astrology reading one time, and the lady wanted to start identifying me as like a crystal this and a crystal this, and I stopped her and I was like, I can't, you can't put me an identity on me. It
Yeah.
feels really uncomfortable to be told who I am.
Yeah.
And that was the part of me that knew that putting a label or an identity on myself was a limiting thing. And I think that's really where we all are like kind of getting to that place
Mm-hmm.
where we understand that. And so I feel like there's like this break, right? Where that old paradigm is starting to kind of fall away. But I wanted to, before we move into the next topic, I feel like I want to talk about one thing, and that is how tricky the ego can be. And especially a lot of us that when we're first awakening, we are going to, to get our Akashic records read, or we're going to get a channeling done, or we're going to a healer. And we always want to, when we're going into those sessions, we always want to say what resonates with me, not this person has the answer, this person is going to heal me, this other entity, or whatever it is going to be the one that uh, enlightens me, and my life is going to be wonderful. And it's okay to go and have a reflection, to receive information, to challenge your consciousness to ascend. But when we go in and we're hearing things like, oh, in a past life you were a witch, and this is why you're having the problem that you're having now, this is what happens. And you can see this in different aspects of your life when you attach to identity, is that for the moment, your ego loves it. And it's like, now I know who I am. Now I know why I am the way I am. And you feel like you healed because you get that high because the ego had a little boost, right? It's like, ooh, yes, this is it. And then what happens is maybe a couple days, maybe it's a couple weeks, maybe it's even a couple months. But eventually you cycle back to the exact frequency of when you signed up to get the session. And you're like, oh, man, I thought that I healed. And then the ego goes, well, but now you know why you are the way you are. And it just creates a stronger timeline than what it was before, because now the ego has another reason to be the way it is. And so
Mm-hmm.
that is the one of the biggest loops of identity in a story, in a, like who we think we are, why we're the way that we are. And instead, it's like, okay, this is my experience right now. Who am I if I'm not in this experience? And instead of answering it from your mind, like you said, open, allow that energy, the high self, however you want to see it, to start to show you. And then life becomes, it becomes a treasure hunt. I think we talk about that all the time. It's like, oh, it's a divine treasure hunt. Who am I going to be next?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where the clean slate starts. Then you get to start being open to all the possibilities. And because it's everything, anything and everything, and so when you allow yourself to recognize that I'm still trying to identify myself with something, then it's still holding you in that little box. But then, and I hear that all the time. Well, I was a witch, and this is why this happened. Okay, so then are you going to change anything? Or are you just going to be able to justify your actions, your emotions, and your feelings because this is now your label?
Yeah.
And this is what you can blame, or
Yeah.
this is what you can say, what is. And so it's almost like a crutch as well if we don't use it in a way that we can really let it go. And I think that's the objective of my records. When I'm using the records, it's that point to see that, okay, you want to know who you were in a past life? This is who you were in a past life. This is the lifetime that you're meant to break that tie, that you're meant to pull that thread and no longer be attached to what once was. And then this opens up to all the new possibilities, all the happiness and joy and everything that is. And again, it's breaking down a label. It's taking yourself out of the box to fit in a specific construct.
I absolutely agree. I feel like also this is where, when we need to have an identity, we can just start to use what I call divine avatars. It's like, okay, would it be to be a divine inventor, or what would it be to be a divine communicator, or what would it be to be a divine architect of my life? And I love putting that word like divine, and you can put, universal, God, whatever word you want to put there, high self. But I put that word ahead of it, it's like, okay, I'm not going to just be an architect in my life. I'm going to let the divine show me what an architect is. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's not that I'm attaching to that identity. I'm attaching to not even attaching, I'm exploring the possibilities of what that could be like. And so in that state, we're going back to that state of receiving or allowing it to be shown to us. And that's the shift of consciousness. It's going from consciousness wanting to fully identify and consciousness being used as a tool just to be shown and then evolve through.
Mhm. So, what else do you think that because this was really your topic and this was something that you feel very passionate about talking about. So, what have we not covered? What else do you want to share?
I think we covered my big ones. I wanted to go into the healing and what you're showing up when we're choosing to have an experience of reaching out to somebody to support our evolution, that we do not give the power to the other person and that we don't leave looking for new identities, but a reflection of how we can expand our own consciousness, how we can start to open ourselves up. Because I do believe reflection is one of the most powerful ascension tools there is. When we're in the presence of another with the agreement for ascension, magic can happen. But it's when one person goes and puts the other person as the pedestal that becomes distorted. I have a saying, it's like when there are two, there's always three,
Mm,
right? There's you, there's me, and there's the divine or a higher state of consciousness. And so that reflection is always to be able to see the information that's or the frequency that's here more clearly. And so when we go into a session like that, magic happens, and that's where all sessions should be done from. And of course, that's my opinion. All of this is my opinion. Uh,
mm.
so that was, I think we covered most of it, honestly. Do you have anything else you would add?
No, I think it's really important for people to understand how much control their ego has, and that we don't have to hold on to the belief system that you have to have that, or again, or even just allow yourself to understand, okay, well, I have an ego, but let's shift from the third dimension energy ego to the fifth dimension energy ego, and what that looks like and what the feeling and how you would experience that. And so however you want to label it, however you want to look at it, it just being able to recognize that, when the power of the ego is speaking to you, being able to understand that it's the ego that's speaking, it may not be this divine energy that is really meant to guide you. And I think that this is really important part of what this transformation is into the fifth dimension energy. And we talk about it all the time. People, I can't discern when I'm channeling information. I can't tell if it's my head or if it's the energy that's coming through me. This is part of what's happening, is to be able to discern when it's the soul energy that's speaking to you, when it's your guides, when it's that intuitiveness of who you are. When we can start discerning the stories of the mind and the ego and those voices that are coming to us, and we can become more integrated with the soul energy and learn how to function from this energy instead of this energy, that's when we're shifting. And that's really what's happening moving into this fifth dimension energy, is that we are being pushed to let go of the boxes and the labels.
Yeah.
But we also have to be open enough to receive that idea and not be fearful of it.
It's so interesting that we all have a map, the frequency of source within us, and intelligence of source. We all are created through the vibration of source. That is our innate being. And that vibration actually can be measured at 963. So the density of our body is measured at 7.8 hertz, I believe. And the vibration of the frequency of our body when it's connected into the 12-strand DNA system is measured at 963. That's a huge frequency shift. So if
Yeah.
we're identifying ourselves as the body, and that our experience of what we would call, the programming, the primal body, and a lot of our ego is attached to that because it's there to keep us safe.
Yeah.
And so it will run the programs of that. But when we start to break open, we start to explore, like, wow, there's a whole nother, like, multiverse within us. Like, we truly are the frequency of source, and that all of that is inside. And when we start to open ourselves up to that, it's mind blowing, right?
Yeah.
And it's exciting, and it is important to find others that are also having the same experience, because it is nice to have a reflection
Mhm.
of that experience, because it is a very personal experience, but it can be shared with others. And that's what my passion is with us doing this as well, because I just love
Yeah.
having these conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, do you want to do the sunflower?
Why don't we end with that? Because feel it, what I love about this exercise is it gives your body the sensation of what it is to be in that allowing state or that receiving state, where you're no longer searching for an identity through a program, that third dimensional programming, but you're opening yourself up to allowing the fifth dimension or the high self to bring conscious into an ascension. All right, so let's just shut our eyes and imagine a sunflower. And as you're imagining the sunflower, just feel what it feels like to hold the image. Feel what your body feels like. How much energy it takes for you to keep that image of the sunflower. Okay, now open your eyes. And now shut your eyes again. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to ask that the frequency of source that is stored within every cell of your body to show you a sunflower. And just notice what the body starts to feel like. And even notice maybe if your mind wants to come in and name the experience, or maybe try to bring an image back, just releasing all of it and allowing source to show you, even staying in the experience over trying to create something. And I love this exercise. You can open your eyes whenever you're ready. What I love about this exercise is that you can start to experience all the little parts of, does my mind want to come in and name it? Does my mind want to like identify in what the experience is? But if you just keep surrendering your consciousness and letting the frequency get stronger and stronger, you eventually move into that state of stillness, that nothingness. Yeah,
Perfect. Yeah.
love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So, thank you for sharing your information.
Well, right back at you, girl.
Yeah. So, are you ready to wrap this up then?
I think we're ready.
All right.
Just want to thank everyone for being a part of the show today. And if you resonated, let us know. Let us know what's coming through as you kind of listen to us reflect back and forth on these topics, because they are passions of ours. And if there's something also that you would like to us to have a discussion on, drop that in the comments below too, because we want you to be a part of this journey. And a Crystalline Channel, it really is about moving into a space of light, of that new structure of what it is to be human. And this channel is, we can always attune ourselves to these really specific frequencies within that. So if there's something you would like to tune into, just let us know.
Yeah. Thank you guys for joining us.
Lots of love.